And I'm Josh.
And this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. And you are listening to week 2 of the Fanimated Gift Exchange, in which I let my friends choose what we're watching.
Gift exchange present.
Yay! It's a present for everybody, including the listeners.
The presence is our presence. Again.
Probably mostly for the listeners, I would say.
And of course, last week, Josh chose the movie Ratatouille, and we had a lot of fun watching that one and discussing it. And so this week, it's Kate's turn to choose.
Yes.
So, Kate, what did you choose?
I chose The Fox and the Hound.
Woo-hoo.
Woo!
Because we're the best of friends.
Oh no! Everyone listening is going, no! Why?
Kate, why did you choose The Fox and the Hound?
Because I'm a sadist.
You
No,
know,
that's not true.
I thought that was the case. when you picked it, I was like, she's just doing this to torture me, isn't it?
This is the reason why I chose it. It's purely selfish reasons, because anytime I ever suggest to anyone, you know what, we should watch The Fox and the Hound, every single person ever has been like, are you kidding me? We're not watching that movie. And I guess I didn't realize how strongly people felt about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they clearly haven't watched it recently.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
I would agree that I would have been on that boat of, The Fox and the Hound, really? But, after rewatching it, I'm like, The Fox and the Hound, really? Really?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a good film. I enjoyed it more than I thought that I would.
I was a little, going into it, I was a little like, oh, I hope this holds up to my memory of this movie. Because I have revisited some of the classic Disney films and gone, oh boy, that did not age well. Or my memory does not align with what I just watched. And I feel like my memory was pretty clear on this one. I did watch this a lot as a child.
Okay.
Which probably explains a lot about me. I really love sad things. And
Yeah, you said, Kate has said that, the mark of a good film for her experience, is if she cries.
if I cry, it means it's a great movie. Depending on how hard I cry, there's kind of a spectrum. But usually if tears are shed, it's a good movie.
Well, I get that, because that means it's done an emotional journey for you. And all films in some regard are really just peddling emotions, and they're telling stories that are supposed to evoke emotion, and that's one that is maybe cathartic for you. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Josh, did you grow up on this one?
No, I did not. I think maybe I watched it one time growing up, maybe, and all I remembered was it's sad. So I didn't remember a lot going into it, and I remember when I got the title from you, that was like, this is the one you'd be watching, I was like, oh, cool. I don't actually remember very much about that. And I told my wife Ashley about it, and I was like, do you want to watch this with me? And she said, The Fox and the Hound? No, I am not gonna cry today.
That's usually the response I get from people is absolutely not. So
And it's so true. I am gonna tell you right now, I cried. And I don't cry for a lot of movies, but I think this movie has something about it that is it is a tear machine, and it is there in order to produce those tears for you. I'm okay with it.
I think both of us said we didn't cry watching it this time.
Not this time.
But I still love it.
But I've cried watching it.
Me too.
I'll say one thing. I didn't think I had a history with this movie until I watched it yesterday, and I had this visceral, nostalgic reaction to that little worm.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
And
the worm.
I realized I did watch this quite a bit as a child because I remember that little worm.
Should we maybe do a plot recap before we go further?
Yes, do it.
All right,
What's
Kate,
the movie
give us
about?
a synopsis. Oh, wait, before you go, this is your last spoiler warning in case you have not watched it in the 40 years.
40
years.
40 years.
Why did I say 20?
41 years.
40 years that it's been out. So, spoiler warning. And Kate, synopsis away.
Okay, so we start out this movie. Oh, I'm going to try and make this short. So the movie starts out and we see a mama fox trying to protect her baby, and things maybe go awry a little bit in the beginning. And we find baby fox alone, and he happens to be on the property of Widow Tweed.
Yeah,
I think is her name.
That's her name.
Tweed or Tweedy, I don't
Tweed.
know. And she comes across him and she sees that he is alone and struggling, just this little baby, and she adopts him and brings him into her home. Fast forward a little bit, we meet her next door neighbor, Amos, and he is a hunter with some hunting dogs, and he adopts a new little puppy whose name is Copper. And Todd is the name of the fox, and they meet one day and they become the very best of friends. And they have a grand old time together. And then as they grow up, we see that it's not always easy when a hound and a fox are best friends. And so they have to navigate growing up and, succumbing to their natures, if you will. And it's just about the struggles and the joys of life and friendship.
That's an excellent synopsis.
Thank you.
Yes,
Indeed.
Well done.
Well done. Snaps for Kate, everyone.
Snaps.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much. Where do we even?
I don't know.
Begin with this
Yeah.
one. So let's go with our protagonists, Todd and Copper. Do you have a favorite?
You know what? I think when I was a kid, I'm pretty sure that Todd was my favorite. And I feel, even watching this movie as an adult, I do feel like the film definitely sways in favor of Todd.
Yes.
Yeah.
He seems to be the protagonist a little over Copper.
I mean, the hunter is never the good guy.
No. But I feel like this viewing, I really kind of felt a little more for Copper. I felt a little more for his struggle and his, do I do what I have been trained to do, or do I follow, my heart and my compassion for this person that was once my friend.
Yeah.
And I just think both of them are so freaking cute. The animators did a really good job, and now I kind of want a basset hound.
Yeah, they really did a good job making you fall in love with them as soon as you could. And I agree that it kind of sways towards Todd, just because he's kind of the driving force of the story and he's the protagonist in that way. But Copper is, without your love for him and without the connection that they build for him right away, none of the emotion pays off later. You have to love them both in different ways for it to really work. And so I think when I was growing up and I watched the one time, the little memory that I have of it was not really liking either of them. But I didn't like Copper, especially because he was the scary dog, and I liked the birds, I liked the owl, and now I think I really appreciate their characterizations and how different they become. And I feel like there's a lot of things that you could draw that were maybe why they were inspired to make these two characters as they were. I even thought is Copper kind of like a soldier human, and Todd is kind of like a softer human, someone who maybe is not as aggressive, strict. Yeah, there's this idea of freedom and discipline, and there's these themes of you gotta be hard and tough, Chief talks about that to Copper. You gotta be firm because you're gonna be to be a good hunting dog or whatever he says. And then at the same time, Todd is just mischievous, and so he doesn't have like the boundaries, and so he's playful and like doing all those other things. And so to me, I see a lot of parallels in different types of humans that they could have drawn inspiration from, and that could connect to those characters.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely like a nature versus nurture kind of story, like being at odds with, your kind of own biology versus the environments that you were brought up in. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it's just it's interesting to kind of like lay those qualities within a story about animals.
Yeah, because you have two animals who are not supposed to be friends, and who, like, by all of their natural instincts, won't be and shouldn't be, and that kind of unfolds. Yet they were friends as children, and the power of friendship, how it can overcome. I think you're right, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely, agreed. Mm-hmm. This film is full of like just really strong characters. Like even when you don't get the characters for very long, like I feel like every character is like just leaves such an impact. Mm-hmm. and beyond just Copper and Todd, just like we've mentioned Chief and Amos and Tweed and all of the other animals and birds. Like what are some of your other favorite characters?
I really love Widow Tweed. Mm-hmm. I just think that she, I just feel so much for her mm-hmm. in her story arc. I think in a little way she kind of is a bit of the lens for the audience. I feel like maybe this is just my own personal viewing experience, but I feel like I kind of can see through her perspective a little more. I do question some of her, the way that the story is blacked out. I do kind of question some of the story beats that lead to her leaving Todd in the forest. But we can certainly talk about that later.
You can go into it now.
Do it, Kate.
Should I go into it now? Okay,
so
dive in.
Okay, well, I feel like in order to talk about that, I'm going to bring up something. I did a little bit of digging into the story because this movie is based on a book. It's right. It won some big prize in the literature world. I can't remember what it was. But if you look at the story synopsis of the book, it's the same story structure, but all of the plot points are flipped. So, for example, Copper is not the brand new puppy that comes in. Copper is the old dog, and Chief is the new dog that's brought in. Basically, everybody dies, too. Nobody dies in this movie.
Oh, sad.
So, that being said, the story point in the novel, I want to say that Todd is... So, in the story, Todd is, like, brought up from a baby. Todd and Copper are never friends in the story. It's just a story about a dog chasing a fox, really. And so, Todd, once he reaches the age of fox maturity, he is released into the wild again. He's been nurtured back to health. He's released into the wild. There's the whole scuffle between Copper and Todd and Chief. And in the book, Chief dies after being hit on the railway tracks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that is the impetus for Copper wanting revenge on this fox, why they're hunting him so thoroughly. And that was a point of contention in the behind the scenes of creating this movie, was that there was one camp who felt like Chief needed to die, and there was one camp who was saying, this is a movie that we are marketing for children. Mm-hmm. We can't kill the dog. I promise I'm getting to the point.
No, that's fascinating in and of itself, because I feel like Disney does not have a problem killing off characters now.
No, exactly. No. But this was 1981.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't quite in there.
I mean, it's pretty traumatic as it is, and he doesn't die. So.
Right.
Right.
So with her bringing Todd into the forest, I just don't really think that the impetus is super strong, because by all means he's a domesticated fox now. Like, he's kind of reached the age of maturity, but his whole life he has been basically a house fox and doesn't really know. So I feel like looking at that scene, it's like, why wouldn't she just, you know, try to protect him, as opposed to being like, they want to kill this fox, let's release him into the wild and see how he does, kind of thing. It just kind of, watching it this time, I was kind of like, I feel like I would, if I were her, I'd maybe double down on, like, stay in the house and don't leave, because they're not going to come into my house and kill my pet, you know?
But would that have been the best for Todd?
Yeah, there's some old logic.
It probably wouldn't have been the best for him, but that's just kind of how I was watching it and going, okay, well, I guess that's a choice.
And I'm sure she was thinking, like, putting him on the game reserve, he'll be protected because there's no hunting allowed, and he can roam free, and he's only one, so, you know, he could hypothetically still learn how to live in the wild. So I totally get that, especially with nowadays, like, with zoos, you know, they don't release zoo animals back into the wild because they know that they would not survive. I don't know that they necessarily knew as much about that when this happened.
Right.
I mean, that was 40 years ago. So it's possible that, you know, we've progressed in our knowledge of reintroducing animals to the wild. And so we know that that would not go well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say they do make a fun, you know, point of Todd's lack of knowledge about living in the wild. So they do make that pretty obvious. He can't find a place to stay. He, you know, tries to fish and fails miserably. So, you know, they definitely play that up.
Yeah.
For humor.
That is a funny bit where he's trying to catch the fish, and she's just like, oh gosh.
And, like, before we move on from the sad scene of Tweed leaving Todd in the forest, upon rewatching this, like, for me, the reason why this works, and not just the music, but it's that we have a very long scene of the car ride.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the car ride that makes it, because, like, they just give so much extra time to Todd being happy and Tweed being sad. You know, like, of Tweed knowing what's about to happen, but Todd not, you know? And, like, that's what makes it even more depressing when you know, pan away from Todd as the car leaves.
And the sad song, and then the voiceover over the song. She's thinking about their memories.
She's like doing a poetry reading that time, because it's like this powerful rhyming couplets about memories, and it's good. We don't do that in films anymore, where we just linger in one feeling for that long.
I would agree, absolutely. The lingering, that's what it is.
It's so good.
Yeah. So good. And that moment too, where like they like when the chorus sings after, when the car is driving away, and it's, you know, goodbye may feel forever, but in my heart's the memory, and there you'll always be. That it's about loss, you know. It's about it, not necessarily just letting an animal go, like in Powerpuff Girls when Bubbles has to let the zoo go because she loves them so much. Yeah. It's not just about loss, you know. It's also, or it's not just about that. It's also about loss and being able to have relationships that, you know, have to move on. And so there are some really mature themes in there that I think maybe kids wouldn't pick up on, but they would be still being hit with this idea of sometimes you do have to let people or animals or things that you love go. I think that's a nice lesson.
I would agree.
This movie is definitely a lot darker than I remember. Even just the beginning with the fox chase and the fact that the credits come up and it's basically silent.
Yeah.
For about the first minute and a half.
I kept turning up the volume, thinking that I had my volume off.
Yeah.
Anyways, we are maybe too overwhelmed with noises and things nowadays that I'm like, it's silent. What's going on?
What's happening? Something must be wrong.
Yes,
my
the use of
hearing?
silence is different nowadays. So let's go back to you talked about Chief and how he did not die. What do you think would have been a better outcome? Him dying or him being injured like he was?
Well, I think in kind of looking at the behind the scenes, the argument for Chief dying was that it was the motivation for Copper to kind of turn. And I think the counter argument was that, of course, it was too dark for a children's film. I would argue this is not a children's film. I would argue that over some other Disney animated movies that people say the same about. I would argue that this is probably not a children's film. But I don't know. It would have been really interesting to see if that was the outcome. I kind of like the kind of coming together of the two dogs at the end. I kind of like the little sequence where they're Amos and Copper are walking in and Chief is like, "Oh, my leg!"
Yeah.
I think I've always found that to be kind of a charming moment, and I feel like that gives him a little bit of redemption in my eyes, because I feel like between Amos and Chief, they're both kind of as the audience, we're rooting for Todd and Copper. We want their friendship to, stay strong and, be the thing. And I feel like Amos and Chief are the two, kind of obstacles in the way, right? And we spend a lot of time with Chief going, this is not a good idea. I'm older, I'm wiser. Let me tell you, kid, this is not a good idea. And he even kind of instigates some of that behavior too. And so I think that moment towards the end is redeeming for him, and kind of like he's kind of, I'm not top dog anymore, literally. I'm not top dog anymore, and like this kid is okay. And I feel like that's kind of the turning point for Chief. So I do like that first character, but it would have been very interesting to see if they had the other camp had won and he had died.
Yeah, what camp are you in, Josh?
Yeah, I was in the camp of, I think it would be more powerful if he had died. But Kate makes a really good point that like the way that he survives allows all of the characters to achieve some form of reconciliation in some way, that like we no longer like think that Amos and Chief are like the bad, dumb antagonists, and like we kind of come to the terms with like, oh well, they're just trying to do what they believe is right. And when Copper changes their mind essentially by saving Todd, it allows the hunter to come to terms with things. And then when he's injured on the porch and Chief is watching him, he's like, oh, he's complaining about that leg, with the antithesis of what the moment that you just referenced, where he himself is complaining about his leg. And I think that's really nice for them all of the characters to have some form of relatability by the end of it, so that we don't just have like a villain that we all just don't like, except the bear. Right. And so I feel like that's really nice, but I think it would be more powerful. I think there'd be more conflict, more motivation, more strength to it if Chief had died. But I don't know if that would have been appropriate upon reflection.
I think he should have died. Do I like to see characters suffer? Yes. But also...
Who's the sadist here now?
But also, like, I don't think this is necessarily a reconciliation story, because if they wanted to focus on that, because like ultimately, I don't think they have full reconciliation at the end.
No,
I think
they don't.
They have understanding of each other, and respect for each other, maybe, like, because they Todd risks himself to like save them. Even if anything, it's a story about like, Todd, even though he just has been chased after and had to like flee for his life still goes back to save the people who were trying to kill him. And it's more about that necessarily than reconciliation, because like ultimately the foxes are still separate from the rest of the crew at the end. So if it was really reconciliation, it would be them coming together and moving forward together.
Yep, they would have, there'd be more relationship again.
And like watching this again, and it's been years again, like I truly thought Chief was dead anyway. Like, and then they showed him alive, and I was like, oh, they didn't have the guts to kill him. But like, for me, like, yeah, I'm always about the consequence, I guess. Like, that's what I say when I say that I like to see characters suffer, because like I want to see them have true, deep, purposeful, like long-lasting consequences to things. And I do think it would have like amplified the motivation for Copper in that way.
Yeah, that's true.
But I do get why they didn't, and it leads to lots of funny moments with Chief's over exaggeration of his like.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's a right answer to this conundrum. It's just
no, it's just like artistic choices.
Yeah.
So,
do you want me to spoil how the book actually ends?
Please do.
It's really
spoil it. I'm not going to read
so,
the book.
So they have this whole big fight, right? That's pretty much the same. It's Amos and Copper hunting Todd down. Todd dies from exhaustion.
Oh.
Which I guess this story was actually based on like a kind of famous dog who tracked this fox for like 50 miles, and then they both died of exhaustion.
No way, that's wild.
But so Todd dies of exhaustion, and then Amos is like old and drunk, and they need to get him into a nursing home, and so he goes out and shoots Copper. And it's horrible. And that's how the book ends. And you can cut out this part. But it's, so it's, what? I don't, it kind of, it sparked my questioning of like, how do any of these people at Disney, from like the start of Snow White to even adapting the Snow Queen into Frozen, how are any of these people looking at this material and going, that would make a great movie that we could market to children? It's just, if you really,
there's aminals in it, Kate.
It just blows my mind. I think maybe Cinderella is like the only. Actually, that's
Cinderella
not true.
Is dark.
Cinderella is
it's very dark.
Everything is dark and sad, and maybe that's why we need to make it into children's media. So
you gotta make the dark and sad stuff that has the palpable, cathartic emotions. You gotta make it consumable, and so that you can turn it into a stuffed animal.
But you know what? Yes. I'm not complaining. I love Disney.
Hey, yeah.
Disney. We're here to talk about Disney.
Yes.
We're here for you, Disney.
He says so convincingly.
Because you know what? I won't go down the road of my Disney.
That's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
For now, we're talking about Fox and the Hound, and we do like Fox and the Hound, so we do.
All right. Let's get back to this then. You know what's something that I really love about the Fox and the Hound?
Tell us.
The child acting.
Yes!
Oh, I was thinking that too when I was watching it.
Glorious. They're so charming, and like I love the sound that they have given to their voices as well, because it's like it kind of has that older script with the ways. I mean, they say like "gee willikers" and stuff like that, and I love that. But like just their voices are so charming and sweet. I thought that their natural cadences, as well as like the direction that they were given, was very compelling, and it makes you really fall in love with these two little critters right away. And what did you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. The actors never met, and I think
they didn't.
No, they didn't. They recorded their stuff separately. I think it's wild that you can create chemistry from two people not being in the room together. Because I think I can't. I think it's Corey Feldman, who was
it's Corey Feldman.
Todd?
Copper, actually.
Copper. He was one of
Yep.
the two.
Yeah, and Keith Mitchell is young Todd.
Yeah, he had said that like his one regret was that he never met the other actor from
Wild.
doing this film, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
I know that.
Yeah, I mean, just like, you know, with any film, like it's the mix of visuals and voice acting and sound design and everything that makes it impactful. And so, like, to see like the very cute animation alongside of these great voice acting talents, yeah, it absolutely sells it. It has to, you know, like that's the biggest job at the beginning of this film, is making sure you fall in love with these two characters immediately, because then the whole rest of the film would fall flat.
Yeah, it's the save the cat principle. Have you heard that?
No, please enlighten us.
Okay, so in script writing, there is this principle called save the cat, which is in the first, I think it's 10 pages, you have to have your protagonist do something that causes the audience to fall in love with them. No matter what that protagonist is, if they're really unlikable, you know, they have to do something that causes the audience to empathize or something. And a really easy one is to have them like, they're going about their business, la 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 la, and then, oh no, there's a cat in a tree. We must save the cat. And then they save the cat, and then you're like, I like that person. They went out of their way to save that cat. And so that's the example. And there's this famous script writing book called Save the Cat that kind of talks about that and how to develop beloved characters and whatnot. And I think that in this way, Save the Cat is used as like it's kind of like a charming, like let's make them really lovable and charming through the voice acting and through the way that they look, and the like stumbling with the eyebrows and the like ears being too big, and like all of those adorable little features are, I think, animation's version of Save the Cat.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Don't they do that in the beginning of The Incredibles? Don't they save a cat?
Yes,
they literally do save
they
a cat.
literally save
Okay,
a cat.
good.
Yes.
I was hoping I wasn't remembering that wrong.
No, they do it, and it's one of those. It's actually in a lot of movies, and I have no doubt that Brad Bird was like, I am aware of this trope, and I'm going to put it in The Incredibles because it's appropriate. So I'm sure he knew.
Speaking of Brad Bird,
Brad Bird was an
he
animator.
was an animator
on this film.
movie.
On the
Indeed,
Fox
one of his first, isn't that right?
I think so.
Yes, along with many other Renaissance era
And
animators.
Tim Burton.
Oh, and Tim Burton too.
And
Speaking of which, Kelly, would you enlighten us a little bit about
this
some
film?
history?
Yeah.
It's wild.
yeah, this brings us a segue into like why there were so many new animators on this film, and it is because basically this is the movie that made Don Bluth leave the studio. Not the movie itself, but working with producer Wolfgang Reitherman, and they just did not see eye to eye. And Don Bluth, along with several other animators, all resigned at the same time to leave and form their own studio, which of course Don Bluth made a ton of other great films. They obviously didn't survive. The studio didn't, not the people, but
Pretty sure Don Bluth's still alive.
but yeah, they you know, went off and made their own thing, and you know, that's happened several times throughout Walt Disney history. You know, a large group of animators leave and spread their wings to do other things. And this was kind of the turning point for Don Bluth and many others. And so you know, suddenly they're here with a movie still to make, and you know, a huge portion of their animators are gone, and so they went to CalArts and scooped them all up, and then we got John Musker and Chris Buck and Ron Clements and Glenn Keane and everyone else who just like, if you know, who were they, you know, they had, Disney had started this program to like initiate people into the studio, and so these were all these people who had been part of this training program, and now they were like, yeah, here you go, here's the thing, and these are the animators who in turn, you know, in the next decade like created, you know, all of these phenomenal films in the Renaissance. And so just kind of like a fun little tidbit of Disney history. And you know, Don Bluth, you can really see his work with Tweed milking the cow. Like, even during that scene, I was like, wait a minute, this looks familiar. And Don Bluth has a very unique style.
He does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
But at the same time, her at least like Widow Tweed looks very much like some previous iterations of characters, like the fairy godmother and like can't think the person from Sword in the Stone whose name is escaping me. Like, it's a very similar character design
For sure.
that you can kind of see.
Yeah. And this was also the last film to include all of Disney's 9 Old Men.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So this really is a turning point film, and which was a little surprising to me because it's not a film that I think of as an important part of Disney history, but it actually is, because you're losing all these other animators, and gaining all these newer talents. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's curious. I wonder what that would have been like as a new animator coming in and then working on this, because it makes sense that it wouldn't be like a revolution all of a sudden for them. Like, they would do this one, and then did they do a couple other ones before there was like the Renaissance?
So
There was the Black Cauldron was the next one, I think.
Oh.
yeah, we've got the Black Cauldron. Let me look at my book. Black Cauldron is next, and then you've got the Great Mouse Detective.
Oh, I forget about that one.
love
That's so good.
that one. And they're talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and what is this one? Oliver and Company.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one too.
Yeah, so you got quite a few here.
Until you get to Little Mermaid.
So yeah, and then of course, if you don't know, Little Mermaid is the kickoff for Renaissance.
Right.
So yeah, not too much longer, and then
They just had to go through like a decade of just real hard stuff before they get there.
They were doing their best.
Waking Sleeping Beauty is an excellent documentary if you've never seen it.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I have, actually.
It's very informative, I feel. If you're a
What's
Disney
it called?
fan like me. Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Okay. I will check that out, and listeners, you can check it out with me.
On Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus, and then tag me on Instagram at Joshy Palms with your opinion.
With your feelings.
Yes. And one of my a favorite little nugget that I found. This is found in one of my favorite books, Ink and Paint: The Women of Walt Disney's Animation by Mindy Johnson. And she found a quote by Patty Pereza, who worked as an in-betweener on Fox and the Hound. And at this time, there were not a lot of women in Disney animation in other places other than in ink and paint. And so in this film, there were a couple of assistant animators and people who worked in effects. And so this is a quote by one of the in-betweeners. She says, quote, "When I started working there at the main lot, I was the only woman in my department. On my first day, there was a lot of drilling and hammering going on. These guys came by and joked, 'We hope you're happy,' referring to all the commotion. I stepped into the main hallway and they just finished converting a bathroom for women. As the only woman, that was pretty thoughtful." So they didn't even have a women's bathroom in the department. Wow. And so I always find that fascinating, like just how, I mean, granted 40 years, but still, like, it doesn't feel like that long ago, and there weren't as many diverse voices. And you know, again, now we've got a female head of story at Disney, so.
Yeah, obviously things have changed a lot, but that's crazy and weird. What a strange experience that must have been.
Oh yeah, like walking into a room of all men and not even having a women's bathroom. Right. Wild. And I think of that like, oh man, they were so behind. But then you read this book and it paints it as like, oh, it was such a, like they were, you know, they were doing so well with this film. We actually had women in these departments. And I'm like, what? Because it's very, you know, men-centered for a long time. And
I mean, no surprise there. I mean, it's the 80s. It's like at the early 80s at that. And I
Yeah.
mean, weren't they really working on this in the late 70s?
They were working this took 4 years in the late 70s, so.
Yeah, so that was a tumultuous time also.
Absolutely,
So I feel like for them to do that, it's probably good, an acknowledgement of the progress they were making, and obviously they've made a bunch more, so that's great.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun to hear the evolution.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's wild. Okay, so I have another question.
Great.
We talked about how this movie's emotional,
Yes.
right? Well, here's the moment for me that I got emotional, and I'm gonna try to do it without getting emotional again. After I watched the movie, Ashley, my wife, was like, "So how did it go?" And I was like, "Well, I cried." And she's like, "Okay, all right, why?" And then I was like, "Well, it's the part where," and then I started crying again, and I couldn't even say it. So I'm gonna try. So in the moment when Copper is chasing after Todd and Vixie, right? The foxes are fleeing from the hunter and the dog, and we've at this point seen their whole friendship go through all this tumult, and Copper is very angry at Todd, and he chases him kind of like up this waterfall, and then they kind of cross the waterfall over these trees, the two foxes, and they kind of get away, and then Copper is like looking for them, and then suddenly this bear comes out, right? And it attacks the hunter and attacks Copper, and like tosses them down the mountain, and then chases after them, and he's ferocious, and the animation on the bear is terrifying, and like I think they did a really good job with that for the time being, for what
Incredible.
they were doing.
Yeah,
it's
well done.
very cool. And like the whole fighting with the dog biting him, and like, that was probably really challenging to do, and they did a great job with it. And the hunter loses his gun and gets stuck in a bear trap, and like it's just moment after moment of bad things happening to the hunter and Copper. And then right when the bear is about to kind of do his final blow and destroy Copper, Todd had heard the howl, right? There's this little moment where he turns around and you hear in the distance this little howl that Copper had been doing the entire movie. In the very beginning, he does that ow, 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 and the fox is like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "That's what you do when you're hunting." And so Todd hears that and then goes back to save Copper and jumps on the bear, saves him. And then bear attacks Todd and throws him down the waterfall, and it's terrifying. And you're like, "Oh no, now he's dead!" And then he floats away into that bottom of the river. And then Copper comes up to him, right? So all that to say, I'm painting this picture. Todd is lying there in the water, like dying, and Copper comes up to him, and he's like, "I've found you," and you think he's gonna like bite him at that moment or something, and then Todd looks up and he sees the hunter, and the hunter's got his gun on him and he's about to shoot him. And then there's this really long, sustained moment where Copper just takes his one paw and just steps right over Todd, and he just holds it there. And then it's like for a while, and then it cuts over to the hunter and his face, and he's like starts to lower the gun, and all the music goes away, all the sound effects go away, and there's just silence. And then Copper just kind of leans over further, covering Todd. And it's this long moment of like, after everything that has happened, after all of my rage and my these emotions he was going through, he still decided to save his old friend. And to me, that's when I start crying because he shirks away everything else to save the life of someone who he technically shouldn't have, was kind of like an enemy. And to me, that is one of the most difficult things to do in life. When I've had difficult relationships or friendships that have gone awry, I've wondered, would I save this person right now, and I'm in the middle of being so angry at them? If they were to be in trouble, would I want to save them? I don't know, and I like to think that I would. I like to think that, I have broken relationships in my past that if I were to see them in trouble, I would step in and do something and save them in that way. I would hope so. But the fact that the dog does, and like goes against his own instincts, to me is just really, really inspiring. And because it is all about friendship in my perspective on that, in that moment. And I think that's really special. I'm a sucker for friendship stories too. So
me too. I feel like I can't tell you why, but it's stories about really close friendships that really hit home for me. And I count myself very lucky to have had many people in my life who I am just like very connected to, and it may be for many years, it may be for just a few years. And I know people find connections with stories of family or stories, with like a romantic significant other. For me, it's just always been stories about friendships. And I think that kind of element of like choosing them as your people, there's just something super moving about those kinds of stories for me.
That's really sweet. Friendship.
And I did it, and I didn't even shed a tear this time.
Well done. Yeah.
Sorry, listeners, you don't get to hear me cry.
Until next time. No.
Until next time.
Until we make you cry.
Until we make you cry, Josh.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Next time, let's do like a live watching where we're watching it and recording.
Oh no, that would be bad news for me.
Too many tears. Oh yeah, but the emotional resonancy of this entire film is really spectacular, and they, did just such a great job, and especially for it to still hit home, 40 years later.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like we mentioned earlier, there's so many people who have mixed reviews on it. Like one of the actual reviews that I read when the film came out was from Common Sense Media, which gave it a 4 out of 5 stars and said, the film develops into a thoughtful examination of friendship, includes some mature themes, especially loss. The film is also sweet, but a bit dull. Overall, the picture is good-hearted and colorful, with an ending that carries a nice touch of ambiguity about the tussle of nature and nurture. And then another guy from Movie Metropolis said that the film is very sweet and no doubt a delight for children, but I found it quite slow and tedious.
Okay, I don't know what movie they were watching, but dull and slow and tedious are not in this film. It's like, I'm sorry, we just finished a chase scene. Here's another one.
Yeah. I will say I feel like the parts of the movie that I check out in are the parts with the woodpecker and the birds. I'm just like, I'm not interested in this.
Okay, I need to interject there once.
But okay, Kelly, I will say if anyone has listened to previous podcast episodes where we have talked about Disney movies, anytime there's some kind of Tom and Jerry character within the world of the story, I don't care. Just get back to the main story. I don't need all of these side quests. Like, come on.
Yeah, I'm here to care.
What do you think, Kelly?
I'm here to care. Because again, growing up, I totally forgot that I watched this movie so much. But I care about this worm. I firmly remember, and I don't remember anything about Todd and Copper, but I remember the worm. And I remember these little birds trying to get the little worm. And I thought that was really freaking funny. And you know what? I still think it's funny and cute and sweet. And he turns into a butterfly at the end. Kate.
That is super cute.
Turns into a butterfly.
I love the little bit about like, oh, that guy looks familiar.
Yes, it's really sweet.
You don't even get it. I love that too.
Yeah. Come on, comedic relief.
Yeah. I know we've got to have it. If not for comedic relief.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just complaining to you about the Lord of the Rings series and that there's no comedic relief anywhere to be found. So we've got to have some comedic relief.
See, you do. You got to have some. And I think that's what makes, the mixed reviews about this film kind of interesting, because it is really colorful, and some people find that comedy great. Other people find it tedious. And I think that the very fact that when you mention The Fox and the Hound to people and they get that reaction of, oh no, it just to me shows that like it has an impact. Like Kate, you had said that, if something makes you cry, then it's got to be a good movie.
Yeah, I stand by that.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's something to be said about that. That I'd be curious to find someone who has seen the movie, or maybe sees the movie for the first time, and if they don't have some kind of emotional reaction, I'd be interested to see why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The only reason I can think of that you wouldn't have an emotional reaction to this film is if you weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Or if you did not have a heart.
The heartless people, they're the ones who don't.
There's people out
they
there
don't
like
watch
that.
it. That's true.
It's just such a well-crafted film,
and beautifully animated.
Oh, also
and
the backgrounds. We didn't talk about that, but I just want to mention there's like over 1,000 backgrounds in this film, and they're all like gorgeous.
Also, I don't know if this is true or not, but this might be the first instance, or one of the first instances of CGI within Disney. It's probably not the first, but the little bit with the fire in the foxhole.
That's true. It does use some different special effects. But
Kelly, consult your book. What's the first one?
Let me open my book. But it's not the first, because like they were using computer animated things pretty early, like earlier than you think.
That's just what I read on the internet, and of course everything I read on the internet is true.
Of course it is, Kate.
It's not.
We don't vet anything here.
Oh gosh, can you imagine if that was the case? Maybe I'm lying.
Oh, it was later. The Great Mouse Detective was the first Disney film to extensively use computer animation. But you're right, because they do have the fire in The Fox and the Hound.
This was Disney's first animated feature to use computer graphics, which is probably a lie.
Computer graphics?
Most of the CGI in this movie is shown during the scene where Amos traps Todd and Vixie.
With the fire. I mean...
Write in, friends, if you know if that's true or not. I don't know.
Yeah. All you Disney...
Someone out there has to know.
Fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know. We're over here.
Send us a clip on YouTube.
Yeah. Anyway, so obviously we didn't do enough research, but...
Right.
But yeah.
But we're still fans of this movie.
We're fans.
We are still fans. I mean, that song, "You're the Best of Friends."
Oh, so cute.
Love
Pretty
it.
good song. I'm gonna learn it on my ukulele.
That
Sounds
would be so sweet.
nice, wouldn't it? I should have learned it for this, and then I could sing it for you, Kate.
Okay.
We're all the best of friends.
Yeah.
Smile, cheesy smile.
I'm not gonna start singing because
sparkles.
then it's gonna turn into a thing, and I don't want that to.
No, we can't have that.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, really quick debrief of our Fanimated Gift Exchange between the two of you. Thank you for choosing these films. It was fun to watch them both.
Yeah.
Ratatouille. Listen to Ratatouille if you haven't already. And The Fox and the Hound.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh, for picking something fun.
Yeah, you're welcome, Kate. Thanks for picking something sadistic.
Yeah. Anytime.
I really think that this was a good idea, Kelly. I love the exchange. I love the idea of being able to have a group conversation about this and to give something to each other, because I just think that was really special. So I enjoyed this process.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was so great.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to be a part of it. And listeners, get excited for our next pair next week, which is a surprise because I also don't know yet. So thank you again for listening, everyone. You can hear bonus episodes and vote for upcoming episode topics at patreon.com/Fanimated. Thank you to everyone who already is a member of the Fanimated crew. You make this podcast possible. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Fanimated Podcast to stay up to date with all things animated. I have been doing some live streams on YouTube, so you should definitely be there. The music is written by Jamie Krause. The art is done by myself, and you can find me on Instagram at CandorDrop. And as I said, we'll be back next week again with more animation discussion. So in the meantime, stay tuned
and stay animated.
Oh, did you know that the name Todd is derived from the Middle English word Todd, which means fox?
Oh my gosh.
I thought it was from toddler, like she says at the
That's what she
beginning of
says
the movie.
in the movie. What a toddler says that? I don't know.